So I'll just start. So we'll be discussing this electrical machines or the energy conversion. So in the syllabus actually it was mentioned as the energy conversion, but actually both are one and the same, right? So we need to understand what is this energy conversion altogether, and also we need to go through some of the previous year problems and let us see which is the section actually which has given the more weightage out of this entire topic. So that is the topic of discussion actually what we are going to cover it today. Now it will first me list down the syllabus actually whatever is listed by UPSC. So in that actually, okay, so let me list down the syllabus. So principles of electromechanical energy conversion. So principles of electromechanical energy conversion. So torque and EMF in rotating machines. In rotating machines. And then DC machines, characteristics and performance of analysis. DC machines, characteristics and performance. Analysis. And then actually, so starting and speed control. Starting and speed control of motors, transformers, principles of operation. Principles of operation and analysis, regulation, efficiency, efficiency, three-phase induction machines, and synchronous machines. Characteristics and performance analysis and speed control. Right. So this is the entire syllabus actually what we are going to study as part of this UPSC. Right. Right. So out of this syllabus actually if you notice, so the syllabus actually principles of electromechanical energy conversion. So this is the fundamental topic actually upon which actually all the electrical machines actually depends on. So on what basis actually an electrical machine depends on. So that is the study actually that's what we are going to do as the part of this principles of electromechanical energy conversion. And then actually torque and EMF. So this is the goal of any particular electrical machine. So if it is a motor, then actually we are worried about the torque generation. If it is a generator, then we are worried about the generation of the EMF, right? So both together actually we call this as the electrical machines. Now here actually this is the goal of an electrical machine. So if it is a motor, and this is the goal of an electrical machine if it is a generator, right? So that's what actually we are going to study there. So in rotating machines actually that's what is the output what we are going to take it. And then actually so there are actually different types of machines that are available in electrical engineering to generate the torque or actually the EMF. So those are actually, one is the DC machines. So DC machines, actually we do have the DC generators and we do have the DC motors as well. So that's what we are going to study. And actually when we are studying actually the main characteristics actually we are going to study. So those are actually the characteristics and the performance of analysis of any DC machine, maybe a motor or maybe a generator. So actually is part of the syllabus. And then actually whenever we talk about any electrical motor, so actually we are worried about the speed of the motor, how much speed actually it is rotating, how can we control the speed, and also actually starting itself actually a little bit of problem in the case of the motors, because actually during the starting it will drag huge amount of the current, so to start, so that itself actually will damage, because actually the more amount of the current actually if it is coming, then actually there is a possibility that actually it can damage the circuit. So hence actually how do we start a machine with lower amount of the current? So still actually we'll be able to start it. So those are actually certain methods of starting that are there. So that actually we are going to study as part of the starting of a DC machine. And then actually the speed control of the motors. So speed control of the motor, so this is the goal, right? So whenever actually we wanted to, whenever actually we are studying these motors, right? So we are worried about the speed. So how much speed it has to run, what exactly it is running, can we increase the speed or can we decrease the speed? So these things actually we are going to study part of this speed control. And then actually the next actually till this particular point, actually this is all completely the DC machines. Now actually coming to the AC machines. So in the case of the AC machines, actually we do have the transformers. So transformers actually in day-to-day life actually we do see the transformers. So the main purpose of the transformer is to raise the voltage or to decrease the voltage. So that is the only purpose. So by raising the voltage and decreasing the voltage, keeping the energy constant, we will be able to control the current. So you can increase the current by reducing the voltage, you can decrease the current by increasing the voltage. So this is the purpose of this transformer. So this actually we are going to study in an elaborate manner, because actually this is the biggest topic we can say. Transformers itself is a biggest topic because it has many variations in it. And also like actually in the transformers actually there are different kinds and there are different methods of control of it, and modeling a transformer itself is a big topic. So that actually we need to study to a greater extent in the case of the transformers, and the methods of testing of the transformers and finding out the efficiency of the transformer, all such kind of things actually we are going to discuss as part of this transformer. And then actually, so the principle of operation of the transformer we are going to study, and then actually analysis and the regulation. So regulation is like actually what is expected versus actually what exactly is coming as the voltage. Suppose you are expecting 200 volts, but actually if it is coming 220 volts, that means actually it is an increment of the voltage. Now that's what we call as the regulation, how much actually it is increased out of the rated value. Or actually if it is reduced, we are expecting 200, but actually it is coming as only 180. Now in such case actually that is going to be reduced. So hence actually the regulation is going to be of negative. Actually we are going to calculate what is the regulation. So that is actually how much incremented, how much decremented out of the rated. So that's what actually we are going to study as part of this regulation. And then actually the efficiency. So efficiency actually whenever there is a process, so whatever may be the kind of process it is always actually there is some kind of loss it is going to be involved. Now that loss actually, so you given the input, so if there are certain losses that are associated with that particular equipment and remove that, and then actually you get the right. So now actually we have the question of how much efficient is. That means actually whether you are reducing the, so whether actually the loss is more or less is, so you can give a single quantity, so that is the efficiency output by input, which will give the performance of that particular transformer or any electrical machine altogether, right? So that's what actually we are going to study as part of the efficiency. So transformer actually it has specific efficiencies, like all day efficiency is there, and then actually the common efficiency is there. Like that there are different variations in the efficiency. So that actually we are going to study as part of this efficiency of the transformers. And then actually, so three-phase transformers is an extension of this. So this is actually distributed between 3 different phases. So all those things actually we do study separately, because we do have the connections of the star or the delta connections in the case of the transformers. So hence actually if it is a star to delta or delta to star or actually delta to delta or stars to star, so all the kind of variations actually, what is the efficiency change and what is the current relations and the voltage relations between the primary and secondary. So this actually we are going to study as part of these three-phase transformers. And three-phase induction machine. So three-phase induction machine is an extension of the three-phase transformer, because a transformer and the induction machines actually exactly works on the same principle. Only difference is actually this is a static machine and this is a dynamic machine. but it works exactly on the same principle. That means the transformer, if you study well, then actually you will be able to understand even the induction machines completely. So hence actually we are going to study this. So, and then actually the last one is actually the synchronous machines. So synchronous machines has actually so many other variations. So that is actually you can control the excitation, and then actually the synchronous machines actually will behave in different manners. So like actually it can drag the lagging current, it can drag the unity power factor current, or it can drag the leading current depending upon the amount of the excitation you are going to give it. Because of that nature actually, so this is actually has got some advantages actually which we can use in the case of the power systems for the so reactive VIR compensation. We are going to use this synchronous machine. With that actually the three-phase synchronous machine, whatever we are going to study, that itself actually we call this is a special name called alternator, which is a very big machine. So alternator. So alternator is, so it is as if like a three-phase voltage generator. So that is nothing but the alternator. It is simply a generator which will generate the power in a three-phase, and that machine actually we use the synchronous machine as the alternator. So synchronous machine itself we call this as an alternator, which is used to generate the electric power by taking the mechanical power from some other source, right? So this actually we are going to study to a greater extent, and this knowledge is very much useful in the case of the power system analysis. So out of this actually two topics, one is the synchronous machines and actually the transformers. Actually these are the two machines which we'll have to study to a wider extent, and we need to understand deeper into that, so that actually we'll be able to understand the power systems. So these are the two missions. And then actually the next one is the characteristics of this synchronous machine, and then actually the performance and analysis and the speed control, everything automatically it comes, right? Now here actually we are studying as an electromechanical energy conversion. Now that means actually it involves both the generator and the motor. So these are the only two different kind of variations of the machines, whatever may be the kind of machines it is, whether it is a DC machines or the AC machines, in that specifically, whether it is an induction machine or the synchronous machine. In all the cases actually we'll be studying only two variations, one as a motor and as a generator. So the same equipment actually can be used as a generator or can be used as a motor, depending upon whether we give the power, actually whether the power is taken from the machine. So depending upon that actually we can make use of the same equipment in different variations. That is the reason actually the topic is electrical machines. It's not the generator separately or it's not the motor separately, because the same machine can be used in both the variations, right? So this is about the entire syllabus actually what we are going to study as part of this electromechanical energy conversion. Now actually we will see some of the previous year problems actually in which area actually it is stressed more. So let us see. So this is actually the document actually which is involving the previous year questions of this electromechanical energy conversion. Now in this actually if you notice, so this is in 2015, right? So in 2015 if you notice, so an 8-pole 240 volts lap wound series motor has armature and series field resistance of 0.2 ohms and 0.02 ohms respectively. There are 660 armature currents. If the flux per pole is 0.03 Webers and the torque developed in the armature is 320 Newton meters, find the current taken by the motor and its speed. So this is actually, it was given for 20 marks, and this is related to a series machine. So actually he has given the series machine with all its description, and this is directly coming from the DC machine. So this is DC machine, right? So prove that the mechanical power developed by a self-excited DC shunt motor is maximum when back EMF is equal to half of the applied voltage. So if the field loss is neglected. So this is again actually it is coming from the DC machines. So a 440 volts DC shunt motor has a no load speed of 2000 RPM. It is running at 1000 RPM. So at full load torque it will reduce the armature voltage and full field current. If the load torque is reduced to 50% of the rated value with armature voltage and field voltage held constant at previous values, the speed increases to 1050 RPM. Find the armature voltage drop at full load, neglect the effect of the armature reaction. So this is again from the DC, right? See this actually, what is the weightage actually it was given. So DC machines actually has got more importance in the case of this electromechanical energy conversion. So draw the circuit for the speed control of a separately excited motor from a single phase source and explain it. So here actually this is a single phase source. This is a single phase AC machine. So this is a single phase single phase motor, and this actually have it in our syllabus, though it was not mentioned in the syllabus, right? So the efficiency of your 20 kVA, right? The efficiency of your 20 kVA 2500 by 250 volts single phase transformer at unity power factor is 98%, both at rated load and half rated load. Determine the core loss and the ohmic losses and the per unit values of the equivalent resistance of the transformer. So this actually, it was given for 20 marks. This is directly from the, so this is 20 marks transformers, right? So this is from the transformers. And then actually a 3-phase 12-pole alternator is coupled to an engine running at 500 RPM. The alternator supplies power to an induction motor which has a full load speed of 1455 RPM. Find the slip and number of poles of the motor. So this is actually induction machines. So this is actually 3-phase induction machines actually. So we'll be studying it clearly. So in that actually it was given. So in fact, if you notice in the entire thing actually, synchronous machines were not touched, right? So it is only the DC machines and the transformers and the induction machines. The reason being synchronous machines not touched here, it is synchronous machines actually applications are more in the power systems, but the basic knowledge there is there as part of the electromechanical energy conversion. So the model of UPS, if you always notice actually, they don't touch on the fundamentals. So they always touch on the applications. So if you wanted to solve any problem, then actually you need to have so much of knowledge prior to that. So they don't give any problems actually on the prior knowledge. So they directly touch the extreme end, so that actually if you know all the knowledge prior to that, then only you will be able to solve this. So because of that actually UPSC problems are a little bit tougher because it needs all the prior knowledge, right? So that is the reason actually induction, so synchronous machines actually has given lesser weightage, especially in these machines. Actually I have gone through all these problems. In all the problems, if I notice, mostly the questions are from DC machines and the transformers. So very rarely or 1 or 2 questions are going to be asked as part of the induction machines and the synchronous machines. Mostly the questions are from DC or transformers, right? So that is actually part of this, right? And the induction machines actually, it has actually its own importance. So that's why actually the questions related to electromechanical energy conversion actually are sometimes actually even coming from the induction machines. But synchronous machines was given the lesser weightage as part of the electrical machines, so that you have to keep it in mind, right? But DC actually being it easy, so actually DC machines are easier, far easier than the AC machines. So being it is easier, actually all the variations are touched, or all the models are going to be touched as part of the DC machines. That's why actually that is a simple topic, and the small topic you give higher priority to that, so that actually without having any confusion actually you will be able to solve all the problems in the case of the DC machines. But in AC actually some confusions you are going to get it in the AC machines, but in DC machines actually you won't get any confusion, because actually it is stored as if like circuit analysis only, right? So that's why actually you focus more on the DC machine. And then actually, so this year actually in 2016, if you notice, see this, what do you mean by weaker? So this is from the synchronous machines. And this question actually, so 1100 DC shunt motor. So this is again actually DC machines. The resistances and leakage reactance of a 10 kVA distributed transformer. So this is related to transformers. And then actually, so it is known that the stator core loss amounts to 1200 watts and the rotational loss is equal to 950 watts. Moreover, at no load, the motor draws a line current of 18 amperes at a power factor of 0.089 lagging. When the motor operates at a slip of 2.5%, find the input line current. So this is actually 3-phase induction machines. So this actually induction machine. So if you notice, this is from induction machine and this is from the transformers, and then actually this is from the DC machines and this is from the synchronous machines. One question each actually it was given. And in the case of 2017, if you notice, so a 15 HP 220 volts 3-phase 50 head 6-pole Y connected induction motor has the following parameters. So this is again from the induction machines. And then actually in this cycle the following test data were taken on a 30 kV 2400 by 240 volts 50 head single phase transformers. So this actually, if you notice, this is coming from the transformers. And then actually, so an industrial consumer is operating at 1 kilowatt induction motor. So this is again actually single phase induction motor, right? So, and this is a 230 volts 10 HP DC series motor. So this is again from the series motors. So DC machines. See this, so this is DC and this is actually single phase AC, and then actually this is transformers, and then actually this is, so this is induction machine, right? So like this actually, if you notice in the transformers actually mainly the area of interest is actually, if you notice out of the problems whatever we have seen, it is the testing of the transformers. So that is the area actually most of the times it was targeted. So testing of the transformers actually you shouldn't be missing in the case of the transformers. DC actually both the motors and the generators, both the cases are asked, and actually the testing of the DC machines also is important, and the focused areas are actually the speed control and at the same time actually the torque generation, how much torque it is getting generated. So those are the two aspects actually that were covered elaborately in the case of the DC machines. So if you take 2018, so this is a squirrel cage induction motor. So this is again induction machine, and this is the maximum efficiency of a 50 kVA transformer. So this is related to the transformers, and this is a 400 volts DC shunt motor DRAS. So this is a shunt motor. So this is again a DC machine. A DC generator has an armature EM of 100 volts. So this is again a DC machine. So this electromechanical energy conversion, by looking at all these papers actually, even though you are from electronics engineering background, actually you don't need to be worrying about, because DC machines is as equivalent as that of the circuit solving, right? So not much of confusion is there. If you understand the basic principles, then actually you are there at the DC machine. And if you notice, the weightage of the electromechanical energy conversion is mostly to the DC machines. So that you have to keep it in mind. And the transformers, both the single phase and the three phase transformers, especially single phase transformers, actually the questions are going to be asked in all the cases. So very rarely three phase machines are asked in the case of the transformers. So mostly the single phase machines only. So if you notice, all the questions whatever I have seen till now, these are actually the single phase transformer testing. So that is the area actually where all the questions were asked. So these two sections actually, if you are able to target it, then it will be easy for you to score without having much of the knowledge or much of the effort, right? So that you have to keep it in mind. So like this actually, so maybe these are all the questions actually we can see, right? So this syllabus actually, so it demands that the areas of interest is actually, so electromechanical energy conversion actually they don't give it directly, because actually those are all the fundamentals actually that are there to understand the rest of the thing. So that actually you don't expect any questions from there. And then actually, so this torque and EMF are being the fundamental characteristic of any DC machine or the AC machine. So those things actually, as an application actually you are going to be asked for that. So that is actually, so in the case of the DC machines, so the characteristics and the performance and the starting and speed control of the DC machines, all the kinds of DC machines are important. So all the kinds of DC machines, meaning in DC actually generators are there, motors are there. Again actually there are different kinds of connections that are going to be there. So depending upon the connection actually it was again classified as the series machines and the shunt machines and the compound machines. Again shunt machines are classified into two different categories. So self-excited shunt machines and the separately excited shunt machines. Again actually the compound machines are actually, if the field is actually aiding to each other, then that is called as a cumulative compound, and again the differential compound are there. But actually, so the questions are actually usually on the compound machines actually are not going to be asked. The questions are actually mostly the shunt machines it is going to be asked, sometimes in the series machines. So shunt machines and series machines are easier rather than the compound machine. So that easier sections only actually it is going to be asked. So you be prepared for the shunt machines and the series machines to a greater extent to understand this particular, to get more marks in the case of the electromechanical energy conversion. So three different areas actually you need to target it. One is the shunt machines and the series machines. And the second one is actually single phase transformers. This is one more important aspect, that to testing of single phase transformers. So that actually, so testing of testing of single phase transformers actually has got utmost knowledge actually needed to understand that. So that is the reason actually, so it was asked that particular section properly. And then actually three phase induction machines. So this is actually one more important area. So these three areas, if you target it out of this entire syllabus, you can filter out all, and these three areas actually you shouldn't be having any doubt. So DC shunt machines and the series machines, single phase transformers, especially testing, and three phase induction machines. So these three areas actually you have to be aware of it, and rest of the things actually, especially in the case of the synchronous machine, only the theoretical questions that are going to be asked. In this case, if you notice about the V curves and the U curves actually it was asked. So in V curves and the inverted V curves actually that are going to be asked. So that is a theoretical question as part of the synchronous machine. right? So synchronous machine understanding is needed for the power systems, but from the machine's point of view, it's not a very important topic for us. Got it? Understood? Now actually, we'll see actually what are all these things. So we understood the syllabus. Now some of the fundamentals that are needed to understand this particular topic is, so some physics concepts also we need, and also like actually the basic principles of this electromechanical energy conversion if you talk about. So like actually entire physics actually more or less actually it is dependent on the Newton's laws, right? So like exactly in the similar manner, our entire electrical engineering actually is dependent on the Faraday's laws. So Faraday's laws are the utmost important aspects. So Faraday's laws as if like actually the Newton's laws in physics, right? So there are two different variations actually we need to be talking about. So if there is a current flow, then actually obviously there is an electromagnetic, so there is a magnetic field actually that is going to be induced if there is a change in the value of the current. So this is one of the Faraday's. So Faraday's laws actually what it says is, when there is a current flow, then there induces a magnetic field. Surrounding it. So this is actually one fundamental principle. Suppose actually if there is a conductor like this, so in this conductor actually if there is a current actually that is passing through this, so there is a current actually continuously passing through this. So current meaning actually it's not the static charges. So actually the electrical engineering, the way you need to look at it is, first actually it starts with Coulomb's law. So Coulomb's law actually what it states is, if there is a point charge of magnitude q, then actually it has its own influence on the nearby charges. So there is a nearby charge here, and on this actually obviously it is expected that there is a force that is going to be presumed on this particular charge. So let us say this is of 1 Coulomb charge, then actually the amount of the force that is acting on this particular 1 Coulomb charge, that's what we call this as the electric field intensity, and this is what is given by q by 4 pi epsilon r square in the direction of r cap. So this is the Coulomb's law. But here if you notice, the charge is static. That means the charge is located at a single point and it's not moving from there. In such case actually this is the electric field actually that is going to be induced. That means the static charges always induces electric fields. So this is one important understanding. Now actually the same charge when it's moving like this, that means actually because of the repulsive force here actually it is moving like this. Now in the process of moving from one place to another place actually we say that actually there is a current that is passing in this. So this is what we call as the current. So current is nothing but the process of moving the charges from one location to another location. So that actually the current. So this is the process of moving the electric charges from one location to another location. Right, so this is called as the current. That means actually if the charge is moving from one location to another location, we say that the charge, so there is a current actually that is passing through. Now as the current is passing through, or actually as the flow of electrons that is happening, then actually it is expected that there is a magnetic field that is going to be induced around that particular conductor. So this is one important fundamental principle which is responsible in the electromechanical machines, or actually electric machines altogether, right? So these electric machines actually so depends on this particular process. That means if there is a magnetic field, then actually you see this. So if there is a magnetic field like this, and then actually there is one more magnet like this, and actually the magnetic field that is induced here actually it is opposite to this, then actually it will try to drag towards this. Suppose if the magnetic field has the same pole, like this is the north pole and actually here actually you got the north pole, then actually it is going to repel. And this actually is creating a mechanical force just because of the current is passing through like this. That means actually if there is a charges that are carrying in this particular way, then it is expected that there is a mechanical force that is going to be developed on this particular magnet. Because it is present there, it is moving there. And this actually we will convert into the rotating machine. So this force we are going to use to generate to So to make the motors, right? So this is one important fundamental principle that's what we are going to use it. And then actually one more important Faraday's law is actually when there are flux linkages with a conductor, then an EMF is going to be induced. Now here actually, if there is a magnetic field, so there is a magnetic field, actually magnetic field can be generated even with the current actually, as per the first law actually we can see. So that is actually if there is a flow of current, then surrounding it there is a magnetic field that is going to be induced. So but magnetic field can be generated in a different manner also. If we have a permanent magnet, then actually let us say this is a permanent magnet and this is having north pole here and the south pole here. Obviously electric field lines are going to be induced like this, and this magnetic field lines are going to be induced like this, and then actually this north pole and south pole actually, so from this north pole the field lines actually starts and terminates at the south pole. Now if there is a conductor that is moving like this, that means actually take this particular pen as a conductor which is exactly perpendicular to this particular board, and if it is moving like this, now in this particular process of moving from left to right, there is a magnetic field from top to bottom. It is going to cut all the lines, right? So it is going to cut the lines, the amount of the flux linkages. So this is actually, let us say this flux is going to be of phi. Then actually the rate of change of this flux, so this is d phi by dt. So d phi by dt is nothing but the flux linkages per unit time, and this is the amount of the EMF that is going to be generated in the conductor. So this pen is a conductor, this pen actually is moving like this. When it is moving, it is cutting the electric flux, so magnetic flux lines. So magnetic flux lines actually it is cut, then there is an EMF induced in this particular way. So this is the second Faraday's law, what we are going to use it, and this principle we are going to use for the generators, right? So this is these are the two fundamental principles actually for all the machines. So whatever may be the kind of machines it is, whether it is DC machines or the AC machines, whether it is a motors or generators, all the kind of motors and all the kind of generators of AC and DC all together works on only these two principles, right? But actually the way we use is different, but the principle is exactly the same. So if it is a motor, then actually we are going to generate a mechanical energy. If it is a generator, we are going to generate the EMF. So for the EMF, the electric flux linkages actually we have to calculate and then actually find out the EMF, how much it is going to be generated, and depending upon the arrangement, whatever we are going to use, and what is the flux density I am going to use it here, and what is the number of conductors I am going to use to generate, all those things actually we are going to calculate it, but the principle remains exactly the same, and the motor also exactly the same. So now the amount of the flux that is going to be generated, or actually the amount of magnetic field that is there which is interacting with the mechanical part, so that will create the repulsive force or the attractive force. That force actually is dependent on the amount of the flux that is going to be generated and with what speed actually it is moving. So everything actually you will be able to calculate with the help of these two principles only, right? So these are all the fundamental principles. Now actually many of the times actually we need to understand two important factors. So one is actually the field concept, right? So one is the field concept, another is actually the torque, the meaning of the torque we need to understand, right? So what is this field concept? So this field concept is a master concept, right? So it's not only here actually, even in the case of the EMTL also we do use actually this field concept, right? So what is this field concept is, see this, suppose actually if I leave this pen here, then actually it is going to be falling down here. Now if I go to some other place and if I leave the pen there, then actually again it is falling down. Now where is the application of the force? Because actually any force, it is coming with three different characteristics. So a force actually, if it is operated on any particular block, it is coming with three different characteristics. That is, one is the magnitude of the force, and the second one is the direction of the force, third one is point of application of the force. So these are the three important characteristics of any particular force. So three important characteristics. See this here, actually when we apply a force in this particular direction, there actually we know that there is a one particular direction that is going to be associated, and we know the amount of the force that is applied on this, and we know the point of application of the force at this particular location. The same force actually, if I try to apply here exactly the same direction and the same amount of the force at a different point, then actually it is going to have a different movement on this particular block. So it will try to rotate rather than moving. So if I apply here, it is moving. If I put it here, then actually it is trying to rotate, or actually it is falling down like this. So the point of application of the force also does matters in the context of this particular force, right? Now actually here actually we were talking about a single force. That single force actually it is applied on the block, and we know, or we were able to imagine how the impact of this particular force on this particular block. But when there are infinite number of force lines, that is actually you will be able to understand this. Suppose actually if I leave this pen, actually here it is coming down. Now the point of application of the force on this block is actually, you can say that on the tip of this particular body actually there is a point of application of the force, hence it is dragged along like this. Now actually if I go to some other city, even there also actually the point of application of the force is on this tip, and then actually it is going there. Now where is the application of this particular force, or where is the point of application of this force? So here actually it is distributed throughout, right? Throughout the earth actually this force is actually distributed. We cannot quantify a single point. Now actually this force is having a different characteristic also. Now actually if we go to a little bit higher, then actually the weight is going to be reduced due to the G value reduction. Or if you go deeper into the ground, actually again the G value is going to be reduced. Now actually the amount of the force actually can change at different points also. So the amount of the force it is going to change, and the direction of the force also it can change. But in the case of the gravitational field, so this actually the concept of distributed force, or actually the concept of the point of application of the force which is distributed everywhere, is called as a field. So this actually is one of the very important concept that you need to understand, because we will be talking about the electric field, we will be talking about the magnetic field, and these are actually from electrical engineering point of view, actually these two are very important. And this actually as a separate theory, like actually we do have a field theory. The field theory is specifically meant for this concept, right? The entire EMF is specifically meant to understand this field concept, right? Now actually, now how do you quantify this particular field? So field actually, if you wanted to, right? If you want to quantify this particular field, now the point of application is everywhere it is there. So that is the example. But actually these are the gravitational field we call, because actually this is still a force. So that you have to understand, this is still a force which is dragged towards the ground, and it is distributed everywhere, and we cannot point a single point actually where this particular force is acting. Hence actually this is what we call as the field. Now in the case of the electric field, those are actually a little complicated than the gravitational field, because the gravitational field actually will be having the same direction always towards the ground. And also the magnitude of the force actually we always treat for all the practical purpose, it is a constant weight of this particular block which is acting downwards. But in the case of the electric fields, what happens is, so suppose actually if there is a charge here, then this charge actually, if you bring 1 coulomb charge to this particular location, now there is a force of repulsion on this. So this force of repulsion actually it is trying to move in this particular direction. Now the same 1 coulomb charge, if I keep it here, then actually it is trying to move in this particular direction. So again, if I keep the 1 coulomb charge, if I keep the charge here, then actually it is moving in this particular direction. Now here actually wherever you keep that 1 coulomb charge, still actually you are experiencing certain force on that. That means actually where is the application of this particular force, or actually where is the force that is acting? If you ask the question, wherever you keep it, there actually it is acting. Hence actually this is having a characteristic of the field. So this is what we call as the field. So as this is due to the electric charge, hence this is called as an electric field. So this is an electric field, right? So this electric field actually, if you notice, it is having different directions actually at different locations. So here actually it is having in this direction, here in this direction, and here in this direction. But in the case of the gravitational field, if you notice, everywhere actually it is dragging down only, but here actually going radial in all the directions. So depending upon the type of fields actually, so it can go in different directions and different magnitudes also. The same force actually, if I keep it here actually 1 coulomb charge, as the distance is going to be of very less, hence actually as per the Coulomb's law, it is q1 q2 by 4 pi epsilon r square. Square of the distance between the charges actually is inversely proportional. Hence actually the more amount of the force actually it is going to be acting at this point when compared to this. That means this needs to be represented mathematically, and that mathematical way of representation actually, which we call as the field representation, this is always a vector. So that is one important aspect. So because the force is a vector, and this force is having different magnitude at different location, and it is having different directions at different locations. These are the two important characteristics actually which will complicate the analysis. So different magnitude and different directions at different locations. So obviously it is dependent on the location, that is nothing but the position. So that means, so this can be, so this is phi of x comma y comma z into I plus psi of x comma y comma z into j plus xi of x comma y comma z into k. See this, so this is a vector which is having three components of the vector, but these are variables dependent on the position. So this will assure the field representation, because upon the position x comma y comma z, phi will have a different value, psi will have a different value, and xi will have a different value, which will give you a combined effect of a magnitude of the force and the direction of the force, which represents the scenario of this particular field. That means any vector which is represented in this particular format can always be called as a field. So this is what the study of this, actually we call this as the field theory. Right, so this is the field theory. Now actually there is something called actually the conservative fields. The conservative fields are nothing but if del cross f equal to 0. If del cross f equal to 0, then actually f is called as a conservative field. And this is called as the conservative field. So if the cross product if equal to 0, then actually there won't be any crisscross between these two. So that is the meaning of it. That means actually these lines are actually will not be interacting with each other. So these are actually going away radially. All such kind of places actually where the force lines are actually not intersecting at any other locations other than the starting point, that kind of nature we call this as the conservative field. Now the conservative field will have the impact that del cross f value is always equal to 0, right? Now if del cross f equal to 0, then mathematical identity f can always be represented with minus del phi. F can always be represented with minus del phi, where phi is called as the scalar potential. So this is called as the scalar potential, right? So because of this, f can be represented with the scalar potential phi. Hence actually this phi, actually there is something called voltage. The term was introduced just because of the reason that we always deal with the electric fields which are conservative in nature, and then actually by expressing the f into this minus of del phi, the great thing whatever we have achieved here, it is a vector expressed in terms of a scalar. So this phi is a scalar, right? So because of this, actually we have got a huge advantage in the analysis, because whenever we are dealing with the vectors, we have to deal with three different variations. So that is I component, j component, and the k component. But when we are dealing with the scalars, then actually you can straight away add it. So you don't need to worry about the directions at all. You just need to worry about the magnitudes, and then actually you can add it or subtract it, or actually you can do any kind of combinations if it is a scalar. So because of the inherent nature of the electric field, these are being the conservative fields. If we are going to analyze as a field, this field actually is expressed in terms of the potential. Hence actually the potentials are the ones actually we always talk about. So if you are able to express into this potential, then actually we can deal with the potentials. Then actually our analysis will be far easier. Because of this reason, we have introduced a term called voltage or the potential. Other than that, actually there is no need of doing the voltage or the potential analysis. Based on this understanding only, we brought that particular term into the electrical engineering, right? Now actually this is a potential. What is a potential? Now actually how we can convert into a vector into a scalar? So this is the fundamental question. Now the physics background for that is a vector conversion into a scalar is, now we know that actually a force, suppose actually if there is a force like this, on this particular force if you apply, then actually it is trying to move in this particular direction. Let us say the displacement vector is going to be of d, which is nothing but moving the point from one location to another location, and the force that is acting on this actually, so this is acting at certain angle. Then actually the horizontal component of the force is nothing but this is going to be of F cos theta, right? So this is F cos theta which is acting on this, and this F cos theta is moving this block towards one direction. Now the effective force acting on this is only F cos theta, and then actually it is moving in the direction of D, hence actually, so F cos theta into D will be the work. So force into this will always give the work. So this is the work is equal to F into D into cos theta. Here you don't need to worry about the direction. Why? Because F cos theta direction is always in the direction of D, because the angle taken is actually towards this D direction. Actually, how much is the force that is acting angle? So this force acting at an angle of theta, and F cos theta is always in the direction of D. Then actually there is no need to specify the direction at all, because F cos theta and D are actually always overlapping each other. Hence actually there is no need to specify the direction at all. That's exactly the reason actually the product of this actually, which we call this as F dot D, which we call this as a scalar product. So for scalar product actually we don't need to worry about the direction at all, because both are always overlapping each other, and hence actually this work is a scalar. Now this is the fundamental understanding of physics, to think in the direction of converting a vector into a scalar. Why? Because F is a vector, D is a vector, and the combination which we are taking out is a scalar, which is a work. So work is nothing but the potential, right? So work is defined as the potential. So here actually F into D is a scalar, though actually F is a field vector, but still actually we can work with the work. Work can be added together. Suppose actually, so I have done 10 joules of work, you have done 30 joules of work. Then both the things together actually it will be 40 joules of work. It doesn't matter actually whatever the direction of the force here it is. Suppose actually if you take the vector format, then actually I have done work in this particular direction by applying a force of F1, and then actually I have done one more force exactly opposite to that with an amount of F2. Then these two being the vectors, you cannot straight away add it, you need to subtract it, because actually these two are actually acting opposite to each other. That means there is a necessity to consider the direction. So hence actually it is always advantageous to convert into the scalar. Hence actually we are working with only the voltages or the potential. We don't worry about the electric field. So we electrically, for the sake of understanding, we do learn as part of the electromagnetic fields, but actually afterwards we don't touch that, because actually we have got a simplified method called the potential. Got it? So we will see all those things actually as part of the EMF. Actually we do derive all the variations, and then actually how we can bring out to the potential, I will clearly explain there. Now one more important, so I hope you understood this field concept, right? Any questions on this field concept? Right, because we will be dealing with the electric fields and the magnetic fields as part of these electrical machines, right? And then actually the next important concept is, so the torque. We need to understand this particular torque, because actually the outcome of any electrical motor is always a torque. So the outcome being a torque, at the same time the input of an electrical generator is always a torque. So torque is a fundamental quantity, so which is responsible in both the machines. So hence actually what is this torque actually we need to understand. So as a single term actually this torque is nothing but the rotational force. So rotational force can be called as a torque. Now what is a force and what is a rotational force? Now what is the analogy between these two? If you see actually, suppose actually if there is a block here, on this block actually if I apply a force on this, then actually it is moving from this location to this location. So from point A to point B it is moved. Now if you notice, this is the force that is applied on it, and then actually every part of this particular block is moved. That means that there will be a 1-1 correspondence between each and every point here. So this point is moved to here, and this point is moved to here, this point is moved to here, and this point is moved to here. Now all the particles are having a single moment. There is no difference between the movements of each and every particles of this particular block, and this is actually causing the linear displacement. So force causes linear displacement, right? Now exactly the similar manner actually I will give you one more scenario. Suppose if there is a rod like this, so there is a rod like this. Now this rod actually, now it is pivoted here, and then actually if I apply a force on this, then actually it is trying to rotate. Now in this case, if you notice, this is the reference point where you have started, and this is the horizontal line, and from this actually if I start moving it, now if I notice, this point is actually not moved at all, and this point actually is moved the maximum amount of the distance from here to here, and this point is actually medium displacement, and this point is having the lower displacement, this is having the zero displacement. Now to quantify it, then actually you cannot adopt this particular procedure to analyze this kind of scenario, because here every particle is moving equal distance due to the application of this particular force, and hence actually we call this as a linear displacement. Now in this particular case, every particle is having a different amount of the displacement when compared to this horizontal reference. Now how to quantify this? Now actually, again one more important aspect is, now the force when you apply here versus the force when you apply here, it will have a different impact, and if I apply here actually it will have a different impact. So that actually you can easily notice actually in the house actually when we open the door, see this. So how actually we are going to see this? So this is a door, let us say. Now the hook is located here. So if the hook is at the end, then actually it is easy for us to open or to close the door. But if the same hook is actually kept at this particular location, then actually obviously you cannot open the door at all, whatever may be the force you apply, right? So it needs a huge amount of the force actually if you apply the force here. That means the force you applied here versus the force here you applied will be drastically different effect actually it is having on this particular door, but the same amount of the force actually you have applied. But in this particular case actually it's not that. The same amount of the force actually it is causing the same displacement. But here actually the more meaningful way of representation of here it is, now this is the distance which we call this as the radial distance, and if I apply the force here, and this force actually, the impact force or actually the effective force that is acting on this is only the perpendicular component of the force. So this radial distance and the perpendicular component of the force will together will decide how much distance this door has to move. That means the perpendicular component of the force is actually f sine theta, because actually this is the r direction, this is the angle theta, f sine theta is the vertical one, and f cos theta is the horizontal. That means if you try to drag the door this way, then actually it won't move, or if you drag in this way, it won't move. If you push vertically, then only actually it will move, or actually if you drag vertically, then only it will try to move. That means f sine theta is the one which is responsible. F sine theta is the responsible component of the force in moving this particular door. And one more important activity is where you have applied that force, that r is the amount, so r is the place actually where you have applied the force. This r and this f sine theta will together will decide. So if you apply at a bigger distance, it is easy to move. If you apply at a lower distance, actually it is very tough to move. Hence actually r and f actually together will decide the amount of the torque. So torque is nothing but the rotational force. So the force is actually having a linear displacement, but the rotational force actually will try to have a angular displacement. So here actually this is the angular displacement we call. This theta is called as the angular displacement. So this is the angular displacement. The amount of the angular displacement it is going to get is where you have applied the force and how much actually is the perpendicular force. Suppose actually if you apply the force in this direction, the component of the force that is responsible is, if this is theta, then this is f cos theta and this is sin theta. So f sin theta multiplied by the radial distance from here to here together actually will decide the amount of the torque that is going to be acting on this. So this is torque we call this. So this is the torque, right? So this is the torque is a vector. Now r into f into sin theta, and this actually usually represented with the torque is equal to r cross f. So r cross f actually this is what is called as the torque. So this amount of the torque it is going to generate, because we were talking about the rotating machines. The rotating machines actually will try to rotate it, right? Obviously. So we will be rotating the generator, or actually the motor actually will generate the machine. So here actually r cross f, that means where you have applied the force and at what radius distance and the amount of force that you have applied, both together will decide the torque. This torque is nothing but the angular displacement. How much angular displacement it has to have it, that depends on this r cross f value. Got it? And this is what is called as the torque. So force will have a linear displacement, torque will have an angular displacement. So force, and this is the displacement is x, and torque actually will cause angular displacement of theta. So both are the displacements only, but here it is called as the angular displacement because only angle is changing. That means actually if I take one line, whatever may be the size of line it is always making the same angle with respect to the horizontal. Hence this is called as an angular displacement, which is a unique quantity for all the particles on this particular block. But here in this particular case, the length is the unique quantity which is responsible for all the particles, how much displacement it is moved. If you take this point, then actually it moved to this particular location. If you take this point, it moved to this particular location. In all the cases, actually it exactly moved the same displacement. So that is a unique quantity which we call this as the displacement. So this is called as the displacement. Right, so this is the displacement and this is the angular displacement. So displacement, the responsible component is the force, and angular displacement, the responsible component is the torque, and this torque value can be given as R cross F. It's not simply F. So this is one important understanding that you have to have it, right? And then actually I'll just compare these quantities, the rotational components and the linear component, because the moment of inertia also is one of the important factors that you need to consider, especially in the case of the rotating machines, right? So that moment of inertia in power systems also we do use. The moment of inertia actually, so there is a clear-cut difference between the analysis. So this is the linear and rotational energy. So linear motion. Now in the linear motion actually displacement, and this is usually represented with x, and here actually we use the angular displacement, and this is represented with angle theta, right? So and then actually rate of change of displacement, and this is called as the dx by dt, and this is called as the velocity, and this is rate of change of angular displacement. Rate of change of angular displacement, this is what is d theta by dt, and this is represented with omega, and this is called as the angular velocity. Right, so angular velocity is represented with omega, and here the rate of change of velocity, and this is represented with the acceleration a, so this is of dv by dt, and here rate change of angular velocity, and d omega by dt, right? So this is usually represented with a letter called alpha. So this is called as the angular acceleration. So here acceleration, there it is the angular acceleration. So rate of change of velocity here and rate of change of angular velocity here. And then actually the force causes linear displacement. Here the torque causes angular displacement. Right, so torque is usually represented with the tau and the force is usually represented with F. So both are vectors. Now actually you need to understand the direction of the torque also. The direction of the torque actually the way it is represented is, now actually whenever there is a rotational body, and that rotational body actually if you try to understand the direction of the rotational body, then we always say that either a clockwise direction or the anti-clockwise direction, because there are only two different kinds of directions that are possible, clockwise and anti-clockwise, right? So anti-clockwise is usually treated as positive and the clockwise is usually treated as the negative. Now on this, let us say there is an xy plane like this. So this is x-axis and this is y-axis, and then actually there is one vector like this, and this vector actually if it is trying to rotate in the anti-clockwise direction, and this is actually is treated as the positive direction, right? Now the direction actually, if I have to represent the anti-clockwise direction, we always treat a direction which is nothing but the perpendicular to this particular plane of xy. So because actually this line actually, why do we take this as, this is what we call as the axis of rotation. Because if it is rotating like this, then actually about this particular line actually this is rotating like this. That means this is what is called as the axis of rotation. Now the axis of rotation is treated as the direction of the rotation. That you have to keep it in mind. So the direction of the torque actually is not this way. The direction of the torque is exactly perpendicularly coming out, though it is rotating like this. So this rotation is a rotation about a perpendicular direction to this. Hence actually the r cross f value, r is a vector, f is a vector, tau is also a vector. So tau is equal to r cross f. So this direction of the tau actually, we always say that actually this is r modulus f modulus sine theta n cap, where n cap is the unit vector which is normal to both r and f. That is how actually we would say. See this? So this is the r direction and this is the f direction. So as we are pushing in this direction, in the anti-clockwise direction at this particular radius, hence actually it is trying to rotate in the anti-clockwise direction. This f direction is perpendicular to this torque direction, which is perpendicular to that. Got it? So this you have to understand clearly. So this is what is called as the torque direction. And then actually the equivalent of this, so kinetic energy in the case of the movement is half mv square. So this is the kinetic energy. But here actually the kinetic energy in the case of the rotation is half I omega square. Half I omega square. This I is called as the moment of inertia. So this is called as the moment of inertia. Now actually I will give you an important understanding of this moment of inertia. Why this moment of inertia is introduced is, we are actually very well aware of the linear motional analysis, but the rotational motion is a little complicated to analyze. Now if the mass is replaced with the moment of inertia, then actually the same kind of analysis whatever we have adapted in the case of the rotation linear motion can be directly adopted in the case of the rotational motion as well. If you replace what with one single quantity called mass is with the moment of inertia, so then actually it can be treated as if like it is the same. How actually we came to that conclusion? Let me introduce them. See this, let us say this is a block, right? So this block actually is trying to move in this particular direction. Now this is the horizontal line about which actually this is actually moving at an angle of theta. So this moved an angle of theta. Now these particles of this particular block, entire block, is having different radius from this particular location. So at different points actually each and every particle actually is distributed, and hence actually now if all these are actually moving in this particular direction, so this is a rotating in this particular direction. When it is rotating, it is covering the same angle. All the particles are covering the same angle. So obviously if it is rotated like this, then actually r into theta, so this is the arc length, so this is the arc length r into theta, so this is being the radius r, and r into theta is the rotational velocity. So this is the length we can say. So this length, arc length actually can be called as r into theta. Now dl by d theta, and this is nothing but the velocity, which is nothing but the peripheral velocity at this particular point. So at the arc, what is the velocity? That is dl by d theta, which is equal to v. And this can be r being a constant, so then actually r into d theta by dt. R into d theta by dt, and hence actually r into omega. So this is d theta by dt being omega. V can always be called as r into omega in the case of any rotational motion. Now we see each and every particle kinetic energy. So individual particle kinetic energy, if you calculate it, now if you take one elemental particle here of mass m1, and the kinetic energy of that is, so ke1 if you calculate it, so this is mass of that particle into velocity of the particle. So velocity of the particle at this location, which is having a radius of r, moving with an angular velocity of omega, and the angular velocity is constant for all because the angular displacement is same for all the particles. Hence actually this is half into m1 into, so velocity square, so v square, which is nothing but the peripheral velocity square at this particular point for this particular block. Now this value is half into m1 into r, so I call that location as r1 omega square. So if I take the particle m1, then the radius of that particle is going to be of r1, and m1 of m1 into r1 omega whole square. where omega is same for all the particles. Now if I take one more particle here, this is the second particle which is at a radial distance of r2 and having a mass of m2, and the kinetic energy of that part is Ku2. If you calculate it, this is going to be of half m2 into r2 omega whole square. This omega is same for that particle also because the angular displacement is same. It can be half r1 square m1 omega square, and then actually for this half m2 r2 square omega square. Now the kinetic energy of all the particles together, now the entire block, if I take it by making infinite number of particles and then I will try to rotate, and each and every particle will have its own kinetic energy. If we add up all the kinetic energies together, then actually it will be the combined kinetic energy of this particular block. Hence actually that Ke can even be expressed as half into sigma mr ir square, r is equal to 1 to all the particles n into omega square, right? But we know our standard convention, that is, so the standard convention is actually the kinetic energy is always called as half mv square in the case of the linear motion. Now if I replace this m with this part case, then actually the velocity corresponds to angular velocity, and half as a constant, it is as it is there. Then actually this entire thing, if I replace with half into I into omega square, where I is the moment of inertia given by this particular formula, then the same kind of linear analysis can be adapted even for the rotational variation as well. So this is the reason actually this letter was newly introduced to simplify the rotational analysis. That is the only reason actually it was introduced. So this is what is called the moment of inertia. So moment of inertia of any particle, so any block actually you take it, that is represented with I, this is always called as sigma mr square. So sigma mr square for all the individual particles you have to calculate it, and this is what is called as the moment of inertia. Now you have to understand one more important factor in this, the moment of inertia mr square, where r is the radial distance from the axis of rotation. That means suppose if I take this particular pen, so many of the times actually we get confused that actually the moment of inertia is specific to one block. It's not. So the moment of inertia is dependent on the axis of rotation. The moment of inertia is dependent on the shape of this particular block as well. Suppose if I take this particular pen, if I rotate like this, then actually it will be having its own moment of inertia. But the same pen, if I try to rotate in this direction, then it will be having a different moment of inertia, which is more. So because sigma mr square, where r is the radial distance from the axis of rotation. Got it? So suppose actually if I rotate the same pen this way, then actually it will have a different moment of inertia. So the moment of inertia concept comes only in the rotational motion, and that too when it is rotated about a different axis, it will have a different magnitude. So this concept actually you need to understand about the moment of inertia as well. So these are all the basics that are needed. So we actually jump into the topic tomorrow. Got it? Any questions? You can ask me now. Actually, I found one very good book. So that book is actually Ashfaq Hussain. And this actually, as per the UPSC syllabus, completely it is there. Right? You don't need to refer any other book. And the questions are also actually directly coming from that book. So you follow that book as it is. So without leaving, so I can show you that book. Even I also follow the same book. So this is the book actually you can refer. So if you notice, two others are there, Ashfaq Hussain and then actually Harun Ashfaq. I think so, father and son, these two names. Got it? So this book is actually one of the very good book, and it is easy to understand also. So pretty straightforward. So the questions are also directly taken from that particular book, and it will be given in UPSC. That's why you refer that book. Yeah, that's all.